Today, we'll be looking into using OCI file storage services or file share services with the VMware SDDC. There are two top use cases using the OCI file storage services with the VMware SDDC. One being where you can actually use the OCI file share as an external storage with the NFS v3 protocol, and that becomes a NFS data store for VMware SDDC virtual machine placement options. And the second one being the direct SMB shares or the direct shared storage options for the VMware SDDC virtual machines. Today, as part of the agenda, we'll be looking into what OCI FSS is all about, the architecture setup for the OCI FSS, what are the things that we need to do in order to implement and use file share from the OCI FSS as a NFS data store with the VMware SDDC. So let's begin. As part of this architecture, you would see that the ESXi hosts are part of the VMware SDDC. They are placed and connected to the provisioning subnet. Provisioning subnet is where all the ESXi hosts will be connected to as part of the VMware SDDC. Our objective is to establish a communication between the ESXi host and the file share services mount target to be able to mount the NFS data store to the ESXi host. So as part of this technical implementation today, we'll be creating a dedicated private subnet for OCI file share. We'll have a security list to establish the communication between the ESXi host and the file share mount target. And finally, we will mount the mount target or the file share from the OCI FSS as an NFS data store to VMware SDDC. So without further delay, let's dig into that. Let me log into the environment and let's get started with creating the file storage services subnet, as well as to look into the procedure how we can use file share mount target as an NFS data store. I logged into my OCI console. The first thing first that I will choose the right region where my OCVS SDDC is deployed. So let me go to the Frankfurt region here. If you click on a hamburger menu and if you go to hybrid, under the VMware solutions, you will find the software defined data centers. Choose the right compartment. My OCVS SDDC is created in OCVS compartment. Let's click on the SDDC and look into the summary screen where you would find the information related to the vCenter, NSX, and HCX and the credentials associated with that. If you scroll down at the bottom, you would find the 3 ESXi hosts which were created as part of the VMware SDDC provisioning operation. Let me click on one of them. If I go into the AMD one, or this is the name of the ESXi host, I can see the instance associated with that. If I click on that instance, I'll be able to identify the subnet which it is connected to. So if I click on the subnet here, as part of the OCVS AMD VCN, I can see that the subnet is 172.24.0.0/25, where the ESXi hosts are connected to, which has got the default security list and the default route table. The next thing what we're going to do is that we'll use the same VCN and we will create a subnet for FSS. So let's just go ahead and create a subnet for FSS. I'll give it a name, FSS_subnet. It's going to be a regional subnet and we'll have a IP CIDR block coming from the same VCN. So we'll use 172.20.0/24. We'll not choose any settings for the route table at this moment because routing is not required. We are keeping the FSS into the same VCN where the ESXi hosts are also provisioned. This is going to be a private subnet for the security reason. We'll leave the default settings for the DNS resolutions and the DSCP settings, and we'll choose the default security list for now, but we'll create a dedicated security list for FSS. So now that we have created the FSS subnet with the CIDR block 172.24.20.0/24, which is the regional and the private subnet, the next thing that we're going to do is we'll create a file share or file system inside the storage services. In order to do that, let's go to hamburger menu, click on the storage. Under the file storage, you have a file systems. Click on the file systems. Click on the create file system. And by default, there are some default configuration settings. If you just go ahead and create, it will have the default settings names for the file system and the mount target and the export path. I will change these details so that I'll have the friendly names for identification. So I'll give it a name as a file system for, let's say, VMware. Make sure that the availability domain You choose the right availability domain for file system where the OCVS SDDC is created as well. For the export path information, I will just change this export path to be more identifiable name. I'll give it a name as /NFS. And most importantly, let's just go ahead and change the mount target information. That's where the IP address will be provided to the mount target. I can actually use the existing one, but let's just go ahead and create the new mount target. So I'll use this information as a mount target for the BMW or the VMware, for example. And this mount target will be connected to the same VCN where the OCVS SDDC is created to, which will pop up the subnets which are available as part of the OCVS VCN. Since we have already created the FSS subnet for the purpose of the file system, we'll use the FSS subnet here, and let's just go ahead and create. The wizard will take a few seconds to create the file system. It will use the export path and attach it to the mount target. In order for us to use this information and create an NFS data store into the VMware SDDC, we should be able to access the vCenter server from the OCVS SDDC screen. I have accessed the vCenter server in the new tab, and let's just look into the storage information here. At this moment, we have iSCSI data store as well as the vSAN data store mounted onto the ESXi host. These are the three ESXi hosts which are connected to the management network 172.24.0./25. That's where the ESXi hosts are connected to. Let's just go back and check the status on the file system and see if the file system got created or no. So file system has got created right now, and then we have the NFS/NFS as my export path. In order for you to have a more secure way of communicating the FSS to the client, you can actually use different options here. You can edit the export options and have a granular control over the export path. I'll just leave the default settings here. And if I click on the mount target, I'll be able to see the IP address of the mount target, which is 172.24.20.243, which has got the export path NFS. Now that we have created the subnet and the file system and the mount target, the next thing is to establish the communication between the ESXi hosts, which are connected to provisioning subnet and the FSS. So let me just go to the, let me take you to the VCN where the OCVS SDDC is deployed. We have created the FSS subnet for file system, and we have a subnet where the ESXi hosts are connected to. So first thing first, let me create a dedicated security list for both of them. So let me go to security list here and create a security list for, let's say, mount target security list. I will allow and create an ingress rule from the source, which is my ESXi host subnet. I will have to allow the TCP protocol on a specific destination range, which is 111, 2048, and 2050. This is a requirement for OCI file storage services. And along with the TCP, I also need a UDP communication from the ESXi host, which is connected to 172.24.0.0/25. And the destination port range would be 111 and 2048. Let's just add the egress rule as well. For the purpose of demo, I'll just use 0.0.0/0 as the destination CIDR, but you can specify explicit CIDR range if you want to, and we'll use all protocols for all egress communications. Let's just go ahead and create a security list for the ESXi host, security list, and we'll have the same sort of communication, but only thing is that we'll use the source as my FSS subnet. So 172.24.20.0/24 is my source, and with the TCP protocol, I will need 111, 2048 to 2050. We'll add another egress rule for UDP protocol here with the same source coming from the FSS file system subnet, and we'll add an egress rule for all the destinations for all protocols. All right, so we have our security list created for mount target as well as the ESXi host. So this mount target will accept the communication from the ESXi host. So let's just attach this to the FSS subnet. That's where my mount target is created to. So let's just go ahead and add the security list, and we'll add a security list for the mount target here. That will tell us that to accept the communication from the ESXi host. Now, let's go ahead into the subnet again and click on the ESXi host subnet here and add a security list for the ESXi host, which will accept the communication from the FSS subnet, which is connected to 172.24.20.0/24. So we are done here in the OCI console. We have created a dedicated subnet for FSS. We created the file system under the storage services. We created the security list respective for the FSS subnet as well as the subnet where the ESXi hosts are connected to, and very specific range of the ports and the firewall requirements for the file share. We allowed all the required communication. Now let's just go ahead into the vCenter server and test the connectivity and see if we can mount the NFS data store. So I'm into the data store view. In the data center, let's just right click onto the data center and click on the storage, create new data store. We'll use the NFS option here because it is a file share. Click next. As I mentioned previously, OCI file share service is a NFS v3 based service. So we'll use NFS 3 protocol here and click next. We'll give it a name as NFS underscore data store so that we can identify, since we have vSAN data store and iSCSI data store already available in the data center. And the folder, which is my export path, which is the NFS. Let me go back to the OCI console so that we can accurately get the required details. So I'm into file system VMware and my export path is /NFS. So I'll create a the folder would be /NFS, and the mount target IP address will be 172.24.20.243. Let me just copy that and paste it here. Let's click on next and select all the hosts where we want this NFS data store to be accessible, and then click finish. If everything is okay, you should be able to see the NFS data store successfully mounted on all the ESXi hosts. Let's just refresh this page and you can see that the tasks are completed for all the ESXi hosts, and we can see that NFS data store is already mounted on all the hosts. You can actually move a couple of virtual machines if you want to onto the newly created data store that can validate your setup. That's it for this particular technical implementation demo. The part 2 of this demo series will include how you can use file share mount target directly as an SMB share with the virtual machines running inside the OCVS SDDC.